The Flannan Isles were a lonely place, even on a clear day. But on this day, the sky churned with an angry gray, mirroring the turbulent sea below. Joseph Mor gripped the railing of the relief ship, his eyes fixed on the silhouette of Eilean Mor looming closer. The island was a jagged tooth of rock, crowned by a solitary lighthouse. A lighthouse that should have been a beacon of safety, but today, it felt like a tombstone. Joseph was the relief keeper, sent to relieve one of the 3 men stationed at the Flannan Isle Lighthouse. He had made this trip many times before, but today a knot of unease tightened in his stomach. The storm was one thing, but there was something else. An unsettling stillness in the air, a silence where there should have been the comforting churn of the lighthouse's signal. As the boat finally neared the landing, the full force of the storm bore down on them. Waves crashed against the rocks, sending plumes of spray high into the air. Still, nothing stirred above. No flag, no light, no sign of life. A cold dread crept up Joseph's spine. Something was very wrong. His crew finally managed to secure a landing. Joseph, heart pounding like a drum in his chest, jumped onto the slippery rocks. He began his ascent towards the lighthouse, each gust of wind seeming to whisper a warning he couldn't quite grasp. The climb was treacherous, the wind threatening to rip him from the cliff face. Salt stung his eyes as he finally reached the heavy iron gate. It was chained, but unlocked. Unusual, but perhaps not unheard of in such a ferocious storm. Pushing open the heavy door, he stepped inside. The silence was deafening. The usual warmth of the place, the smells of oil and tobacco, were replaced by a damp, chilling emptiness. He called out, his voice echoing strangely in the silence. Only the wind answered, howling down the chimney like a mournful beast. He hurried through the rooms, each one empty, yet with an unsettling feeling of recent occupancy. In the kitchen, he found a half-eaten meal on the table, left to spoil. A chair lay overturned on the floor. It was as if the keeper had gotten up suddenly, in the middle of his meal. He checked the lamps, expecting to find them extinguished after days of neglect. But they were full, meticulously cleaned and prepped. Everything was in its place, yet eerily out of place at the same time. The feeling of unease intensified. Where could the keepers be? What had happened here? Joseph continued his search, his pulse quickening with each passing moment. He checked the bunks, finding them neatly made. Personal belongings were untouched, as if frozen in time. There was no sign of a struggle, no indication of what could have caused the 3 experienced keepers to abandon their post. He descended into the depths of the lighthouse, down the winding staircase to the level of the mighty lantern itself. The heart of the lighthouse, its beam capable of piercing the thickest fog, stood cold and dark. It hadn't been lit. Why? The air grew heavy with a sense of foreboding as Joseph climbed back up to the living quarters. His gaze fell upon a logbook, lying open on a desk. There, in the flickering lamplight, he hoped to find an answer to the unsettling mystery that clung to every stone of Eilean Mor. As he began to read, his blood ran cold. The last entries, penned in the neat hand of Thomas Marshall, the head keeper, painted a chilling picture. Section 4. Shadows in the Logbook. The logbook entries detailed a storm of incredible ferocity, one that dwarfed even the tempest raging outside. But it was more than just a storm that Marshall described. He wrote of an unnatural silence that had fallen over the island, a silence so profound it felt like a physical presence. He spoke of his 2 colleagues, James Duckett and Donald MacArthur, exhibiting strange behavior, gripped by an unshakable fear. Marshall himself wrote of an unseen pressure, a weight pressing down on him, threatening to crush his spirit. The entries ended abruptly, mid-sentence, as if interrupted by some unseen force. Joseph read and reread the chilling words, a shiver running down his spine. What had happened to the keepers? Had the storm somehow driven them mad? Or was there something more sinister at play on this lonely rock? He thought back to the legends whispered by sailors in hushed tones. Tales of wailing banshees and phantom ships that lured unsuspecting sailors to their doom. Were these stories more than just superstition? Could there be some truth to the whispers of dark forces that haunted these waters? Joseph considered the possibilities, his mind racing. Had the keepers been swept away by a rogue wave? Had they met with foul play? Or had something driven them to flee the lighthouse in a blind panic, abandoning their duty and disappearing into the storm? The more he thought, the more questions arose. The lamps were prepped, the table set, the beds made. It didn't make sense. Why would they leave in the middle of a meal? Why would 3 experienced keepers abandon their post, especially in the midst of a storm? He searched every inch of the island, his heart sinking with each passing hour. He found no sign of the missing men, no wreckage, no clues to their fate. Only the relentless wind and the crashing waves offered any answer, and their answer was a deafening silence. As darkness fell, shrouding the island in an impenetrable veil, Joseph returned to the lighthouse. He lit the lamps, their warm glow pushing back against the encroaching shadows, but doing little to dispel the chilling mystery that clung to the place. Joseph Mor spent many nights in the Flannan Isle Lighthouse after that. He faithfully kept the light burning, a beacon of hope in the vast darkness. But he never forgot the 3 keepers who had vanished without a trace. Their absence hung over him like a shroud, a constant reminder of the unforgiving power of the sea and the mysteries it held. He would often find himself staring out at the turbulent waters, searching for answers that refused to be found. Did the sea claim them? Or did something else, something unknown, lure them away from their post, leaving behind an empty lighthouse and a mystery that would forever haunt the shores of Eilean Mor? The questions lingered, echoing in the silence, as constant and inescapable as the wind and the waves. And as the years passed, the mystery of the vanished keepers of Eilean Mor would live on, a chilling reminder of the unseen forces that shape our destinies and the secrets that lie hidden beneath the waves. Please like and subscribe to our channel for more intriguing mysteries.